Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Meaningful People podcast. We missed you so much. Hope you had a beautiful Chag, a beautiful Yontif. And here we are. Want to give a big thank you to our friends at Collars & Co. Guys, look at this. I'm wearing the shirt right now, and everywhere where I've been on Pesach, people are saying, oh my gosh, where's that shirt from? And I tell them it's from Collars & Co. It's the new best shirt company out there. And you know what? If you were in the New York area, maybe you were in Florida, but I was in New York, and it suddenly became boiling hot, 80 degrees, 90 degrees. But I did not fret. I did not worry because I was wearing my shirt from Collars & Co. And it is so light. It is so comfortable. And of course, it looks like any amazing shirt with the hard collar and the hard cuff. This is the quadruplex shirt, long sleeve. I'm rolled up right now because I'm a little bit warm, but the collar is hard. The buttons are great. This is the shirt of the future, and I'm wearing it right now in the present. So head to collarsandco.com and make sure to use promo code MEANINGFUL for 15% off. The shirt is going to make your summer. It's going to be great to wear. So go ahead to collarsandco.com and order one today. And of course, you're looking at your bank account and you're wondering, wow, okay, I know Pesach was expensive, but I didn't think I'd spend this much money. And if you're thinking those thoughts, you need to call Moshe Alpert. Moshe Alpert and Associates will help you get your finances right. Financial planning is super important, especially now. Pesach is behind us. You know, it's now time to focus on, okay, what's our rainy day fund looking like? What's our vacation looking like? How can we spend money on the groceries? Call Moshe Alpert. You can give him a call right now for a free consultation. His number is 718-644-1594. That's 718-644-1594. Email him at alpertmoshe@gmail.com. He is awesome. He does amazing work, and he will help you out. Just let him know that Nachi and Momo from Meaningful People sent you. We sat down with an amazing guest this week, Malkie Jacobs. Malki is one of those like unsung hero stories. Maybe, you know, take a page of the book of Rivka Shotkin type guest, where she went through an experience in life which changed everything. She was killing it on Wall Street, amazing job, living each day to the fullest. You know what? And she is living each day to the fullest still, but with so many more challenges. And it's so amazing to hear the story. I will tell you that this is a super emotional story, emotional episode. She was moved to tears, and so were we. This is the story of Malkie Jacobs. We thank all the people who are involved in helping us get this guest. I don't want to mention anyone by name. I don't know if anyone does want to be mentioned, but you know who you are. And of course, before we get to this episode, a big thank you to our friend Isaac Newman for sponsoring this episode. Lezecher Nishmas, his mother, Ruchama, Perel, Malka, Leah, Bas, Aryeh, Leib. All the inspiration, all the chizuk derived from this episode should be an Aliyah for her neshama. Meaningful People, Chevra, this is Malkie Jacobs. You are listening to the Meaningful People podcast.
The podcast featuring our nation's most impactful, influential,
and meaningful people. Malkie Jacobs.
Yes.
Welcome to your episode of Meaningful People.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in tonight.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
How are you, New Rochelle?
Right?
New Rochelle is
Yeah.
going crazy right now. They're like up in arms, like, we finally got someone on the pod. You think so?
I hope so. Right, Jill? We're small but mighty.
Yeah?
Yes.
New Rochelle.
Is it small?
I would say relative. What are we, 500 families at this point?
That's it?
Yeah, but we're small, we're mighty, and we're one shul, and we're an unbelievable community, and we're an unbelievable community during hard times is where we really show our true colors. And it's not just my story. There's unfortunately other instances where we've just lost a member of our community to cancer, and it's just the message that New Rochelle sends during time of hardship should be a koach for the whole world to see.
That's amazing.
Amen.
It really is. Whether it was COVID, Lawrence Garbuz, unfortunately, other tragedies, it's just really.
Is that where like patient zero and that's where
Lawrence
it was?
Garbuz, yes.
Wow.
Yep. And Baruch Hashem, he is doing great today too.
Wow. Baruch Hashem, that's really good to hear.
Yep.
Well, you alluded to it, so that's a good place to start. You got a story. Everyone's got a story.
Everyone's got a story.
Some people have more pages and chapters probably. And like the chapters are like, some of them are Stephen King novels, some of them are, but we're going to hear about your story. And I guess if you could just take us from the beginning, You had a really nice job.
Yeah.
Working long hours.
Well, let's go way back.
Oh, let's go way.
Let's
Oh,
go-
you want to go to LA,
I wanna
don't
go
you?
to Los Angeles.
LA years.
Yeah.
How was it growing up in Los Angeles?
It was fabulous.
Right?
Yeah.
You were paid to say that.
Yeah.
You almost slipped her $100 to say
Let's
that
say
before.
that. Listen, as I
Yocheved,
tell everybody.
Devorah, Batsheva. There it is.
That's
There's a
right.
shout out. How
That's
are
right.
Joel Bess, how
That's
are
right.
you?
Joel Bess, how
Joel
are
Bess is
you?
gonna have his own segment of the discussion.
But yes, grew up in Los Angeles, went to Scharfman's post high school, went to University of Pennsylvania after Scharfman's, got my degree in finance, was always very business minded, wasn't quite on the Wall Street path, but always had a passion for business. And I ended up, after, going to school on the East Coast, I started myself in the finance sector. And I love finance. I love the power of the deal. I worked on the trading desk for many, many, many years as my career.
The trading desk in like New York.
Yes, trading desk
That's
in New York.
intense.
I started out at, I worked at JP Morgan under Jeremy Barnum, the guy who discovered the credit default swap, which many of you will remember. For those of you who are old enough in this room, 2008, many of you will remember it was the credit default swap that was blamed. All those mortgage-backed securities were blamed for bringing the economy to its grinding halt. So I worked under him. I got to understand the whole fixed income world quite intently and moved on to a big hedge fund. We were one of the biggest on the street at the time. We had our portfolio for some of the deals that we had were even bigger than what Goldman Sachs was carrying on the exotic portfolios. So we were
You're working in Wall Street.
This is a flex.
You're working in Wall Street when you're like biggest hedge fund on the street.
No, not the biggest hedge fund on the street. We were a big hedge fund on the street. We got to edit that because I don't want anybody getting upset here.
No, I want people getting upset.
And I hope you take that out.
No, but I'm focusing on the nusach on the street.
On the street.
We don't even name the street.
Right. We don't even name the street.
It's just Stam Street.
Just Stam Street.
Yeah.
And it ain't Central Avenue.
Right. It ain't Central Avenue. It's got a bowl somewhere in the middle of it.
Nice.
What's it like working on Wall? What was it like working on Wall Street?
On the street, Nachi.
On the street.
Yeah.
Only thing
What's
I
it
know
like
about
working on
Wall
the
Street
street?
is Wall Street Grill.
It's a very tough environment. It's a tough environment for a woman. It's a very tough environment for a woman. If my husband were sitting here right now, he would probably be crying if he remembered some of those days. Walking in literally a minute before Shabbos is not an easy thing. Trying to tell your boss that you're going to be out for 2 days. Oops, sorry. And then again next week for 3 days. Oops, sorry. Then the week after that for another 2. It's not an easy world.
Tishrei is a heilige month on the street.
Yes, it sure is. It's not an easy world.
Yeah, see you at the end of October.
Right. And basically that's, as the years came along and he got more comfortable with it, I remember telling my last boss, I was like, Sal, I'm going to be out. He's like, I was like, I'm so sorry. He's like, don't worry about it. I'm so used to it at this point. I was like, finally. So I knew we were in good shape by that point. But
you blazed the trail, by the way, from people that were working on Wall Street.
I think there were a lot more before me. I'm not that old, Momo. He's aging me here. Not
Momo
that,
just wants to feel young.
Not that I know. So take it out on everybody else. But in any event, leading up to where this all started, I was working. I had been working really hard in 2014, 15. I was commuting back and forth. I was in London for a week a month. At the time, we were working on some very, very big stuff going on, and it was taking me to London quite a bit. So it was a very exciting year in 2014 and 15. I had kind of hit the pinnacle of my career, and I was very, very, very excited. And in November 2015, it was an ordinary day. It was Monday, and it was November 2nd, 2015, and I went to work just like every other day. And Monday night, I came home from work. I remember I was actually excited. I had stopped at Lululemon in Greenwich on my way home. I used to try and get my errands done I would sneak out of my office at 5 and the stores on Greenwich Avenue closed at 6. So I had like a 20-minute window if there was no traffic to kind of get my errands done. And I was happy that I was able to stop at Lululemon because my daughter had just started high school. So I had a 9th grader at that point and a 6th grader. And it seemed like so overwhelming at that point. I don't know, starting high school seemed like an And it just seemed like it was so overwhelming with 2 kids with a lot of work. And my husband had just had surgery on a nerve in his foot a week ago. So I said, I can actually stop on the way home because Bezalel's home. So I don't need to hurry as fast as I normally had to. So I stopped on the way home. And the reason I say that is because I think I remember it a lot is because it's the last errand I was ever able to run by myself. And anyway, so I came home and I started to make supper, and I was making supper and we sat down at the table, and all of a sudden I got a backache, and I was like, just my back started to hurt, and I kind of like, you get those body aches, and I went upstairs to bed, and I, just wasn't feeling well. And Tuesday morning I woke up, I wasn't feeling great. And I had my executive board meeting call on Tuesday mornings, which I never wanted, which was super important. It went all the way up to the CEO level. So I wanted to make it into my office for that. And I was going to go get my laptop and come home. And I made it into the office for that. And I had my head on the desk at 10 a.m., but I did my call, and I was just going to take my computer. Even one of my coworkers was like, Michelle, go home. And I I made it through my call, and I went home with my laptop, and I had my laptop sitting on my bed, but I was, pretty much out, not feeling great. And it just felt like, just felt run down and body ache, like your typical flu, which we've all had so many times in our life. You don't think anything of it. And I was, in bed, vomiting, and just, again, total typical flu that we all experience at some time in our lives. And Wednesday, I had gone through the night. I was, feeling still terrible. And Wednesday, my husband took me to urgent care in Mamaroneck, and they tested me, and they said, you tested positive for the flu, and they gave me Tamiflu and Zoloft, I think, whatever, not Zoloft, the anti-nausea stuff that they give Zofran that they give you with
Nachi's had the flu.
Yep. And they said,
and my wife had a kid.
Yeah.
So Zofran.
And they said it'll take, it'll take 7 to 10 days to get out of your system. And we were like, okay, no problem. Went home, and I, just started the course of antibiotics, and I wasn't getting much better. I was still vomiting and, hot, cold, chills, burning colds, hot, muscle aches, the whole 9 yards. And that was all day Wednesday and all day Thursday. And Thursday night, my husband called a friend of ours in the community who he learns with. And he said, Kenny, can you come by and look at Malki? And he came in, and he came up to my room, and he looked at me, and he's like, yeah, it's like they said, you look sick, and it's like they said, it's going to take a few more days to get out of your system. And we were like, okay, that's what it was. Just feeling, you're feeling god awful, but that's the flu for you. Right. And
so you're feeling lousy, but not overly alarmed.
No, why should I? I'm in perfect health. I've never had any problems with me. I don't take any drug on the planet for anything. And, it's okay. So you got the bad bug, right? Yeah. And, we just took it as it was. And Friday came, and I remember Friday night I was really sick already. Or I just had felt really bad. And I remember it's the first time, I think at that point I had been married 17 or just about 17 years. And I think it was the first time I couldn't even make it down to light Shabbos candles. Probably in 16 and a half years that I had been married. But, it's just, I guess, like I said, no one had any reason to be alarmed whatsoever. And Shabbos, and I actually thought that Friday night I was starting to take a turn for the better, because I had made it through the whole night without vomiting. So I thought maybe, I'm finally starting to get better. Right. And Shabbos, I guess I was really, really weak. My husband didn't go to shul because he had that nerve taken out of his foot. And as Jill can attest, or anybody else, my husband to miss shul it would take, I don't know, lightning to strike for the guy not to go to shul.
Heard amazing things about your husband.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He's a real Talmud Chacham, and this guy walks in 1 degree to give the daf yomi, or 150 degrees to give the daf yomi. So for him not to go, but he couldn't walk the mile or 9/10 of a mile. So he was downstairs learning and hanging out, and I was just sick in bed. And by Shabbos night, I think we started to get worried, and my sister was screaming on the phones, take her to the hospital. If you don't take her, I'm going to take her. And, we started to see that things were kind of not great. And we all really thought maybe it was just because I was, dehydrated because I hadn't, eaten anything or been able to hold anything down in 3-4 days, but nobody certainly thought, anything past that. And my husband called a friend of ours who lived down the street, Michael Tarlow, who was a physician at White Plains. And he said, yeah, take her to, you can take her into Lawrence. And my brother-in-law came over, Rafi, and he had dropped our kids off at they were having a pajama night at school. So he was in the area. So he came over, and his friend in Riverdale was part of Riverdale Hatzalah. And, we were going to take me to the hospital, and I said, I don't even know if I said it or somebody else said it. Maybe let's go with Hatzalah because I understand that the ambulance from the law says that they take you within 5 miles, the hospital closest within 5 miles. And to us, the closest hospital is Sound Shore, which is downtown New Rochelle. And basically, from what I know, they basically get gunshot wounds and, the SVUs of the world. So I didn't want to particularly go there. So we thought going to Lawrence Hospital would be a good idea. And I couldn't make it down the stairs myself. They had to take me down in one of those chairs. And I remember getting into the back of the ambulance. And after that, I don't remember too much. I mean, I don't know. I don't remember being wheeled into Lawrence to the ER. I don't really remember that. I think the next memory I have kind of is I was in and out and I was screaming. I was in a lot of pain, and I think my sister sat on the floor that night, and she went out to get the doctors and I think they gave me morphine, and then one doctor came in and said, go get her Gatorade, she'll feel all better. And I started screaming at her, please go get me Gatorade. And she's like, I can't, Malki. And it was the middle of the night. I just have very scattered visions that night.
Like a fever dream.
Yeah, exactly, that's what it was. And that turned into kind of Sunday morning. And Sunday morning, I don't really have very many memories of Sunday morning. The last thing I think I remember is my husband coming and changing places with my sister. And I think that was like at 7 a.m. or so. And she went home to her family and my husband had stayed. And after that, I have no recollection of what happened. I do know what did happen was by 11 o'clock, I think that they saw my vitals were dropping like crazy. And I think some alarm bells started to go off and they moved me to the ICU. And I think there, after the change in shift, one of the doctors who came into the ICU started to see signs of sepsis, along with, really, I owe a huge hakara satov to one of the doctors in my neighborhood who's probably responsible for a big chunk of saving my life, or as my husband introduced him last week at my daughter's engagement party, to the doctor who took care of me at Columbia. This is the guy who saved Jonathan, David, saved Malki on Sunday, and this is the guy who saved Malki on Monday. So he was the one who started to figure out toxic shock, septic shock. It all started kind of coming together. And I know that I think at 1 o'clock or shortly after that, my breathing started to become very, very labored, and it was not looking good. And I think they told my husband she was not going to make it. And that was kind of, I guess, progressively kind of through the afternoon, they already saw signs that I was on my way out. And at 7:45, I coded and I was gone for 26 minutes.
26 minutes.
26 minutes.
Wow.
26 minutes, a long time.
That is a really long time.
Yeah. And it shows you that the brain is very, very powerful, because I don't forget a thing. And my brain works 110% today. So it's a fact that, we can be gone for that long and our brains still be completely intact is pretty powerful.
During those,
I need to pause you for a moment on that. You coded, and when you say that you were gone for 26 minutes, I just need a minute to let that sink in. I'm just struggling to wrap my head around what that means.
I wish I could tell you, because I wasn't there, but if my husband was sitting here, I'm sure he could give you a different story, and my sister too. There was a lot of screaming going on. My sister was screaming, do something, do something. My family was there at that point. My in-laws were there. My brother-in-law Bensi was there. My brother-in-law Rafi was there. I think my brother-in-law Jordan was there too. Obviously my husband, and if you knew my husband, he's 6'4", and he says that's one of the advantages of being tall. He was able to see over the curtain while they were trying to revive me.
I mean, from his perspective, and I'm sure you've spoken to him about it, well, what was going on during those 26 minutes? I imagine they're trying to bring you back, but with every minute that is progressively going, there's a less likelihood of bringing someone back. And with every minute that goes, there's a less likelihood of bringing back somebody with their full capacity.
Correct.
So during that time, what was happening for your husband?
I think he was, in shock and in disbelief. I wish he was here. He could answer the question.
Yeah.
Yes. Jill probably even knows better at that point what he was doing.
That's what he was doing. He was reaching out to people to say it to him.
I guess
and during those 26 minutes, the shul started saying to him, and then it came to a point where, straight out of a TV show, this 26-minute.
Yud Kei Vav Kei, 26.
Yud Kei Vav Kei. One way to think about it.
That
Never
is
thought
true.
about it like that, but that's true.
You've never
right.
thought about it like that? Really?
No.
That's the gematria of Yud
I'm
Kei
well
Vav?
aware, but yes, never really thought about it like that.
How are you, Momo Bauman?
Yeah, go Momo Bauman.
What did you go to school in LA?
See, Taurus MS. Shout out to Rabbi Krause.
Shiva Isaacson.
That's right.
So yeah, the 26th minute, you're back.
Yep.
But were you back though? Like, they got your heartbeat back? Were you awake?
Yes. So I don't know if I woke up at that minute. I do know that they brought my daughter Serena in to see me, and she said, I don't remember this, but she said she was talking to me and I was talking to her. But I don't remember that at all. So I don't even know what I talked about with her, but I do know that she was, talking to me. And I guess at some point she must have gone back. I believe she went back to my house with my brother-in-law, Bensi. And I do know that, I guess at that point they told my husband that they didn't think they told my husband that there was no shot of me making it through the night.
Even though they got you back.
Yeah, even though they got me back, everything was, dead. I was in complete organ failure. There was like nothing there. So, they really didn't think I'd make it through the night. And I know Suri, my sister, was afraid. She's staying with me, and she was afraid to stay by herself with me because she was afraid if I would code again. So Rafi, my brother-in-law, stayed with her that night in the hospital. And I think if I remember the sequence of events after what I was told, Sally went home, I think at 12:31 a.m. in the morning. And Bensi, my brother-in-law, he was lying down on the couch, and Sally was upstairs and in his bed just for a couple of hours. I guess there was nothing that they could do, but they started to tell my husband, I think he was back like at 4 a.m, that there was kind of no hope for her, and there was nothing that they could do for me, and that they needed to get me out of there. There was nothing that Lawrence Hospital could do anymore, and like they needed to get me out of there.
Where'd they want to send you?
Well, at that point they didn't even know. They just knew that there was nothing that they could do for me. And I know my brother-in-law Rafi was instrumental in calling and knew Howard Millendorf from Riverdale, and he's very well connected into Columbia Hospital, which is no easy feat to get into. Getting a bed there is extraordinarily difficult. And I know that Monday morning they mobilized and they moved me to Columbia. I know my sister was with me in the ambulance going down the Henry Hudson Parkway with the sirens going off, because she told me that. And Sally and his brothers were in a car behind. And I know that they got me into Columbia. I think it was early Monday, mid-morning Monday morning, which was November 9th, 2015. And I think that's where kind of it all started to shake out and take place. And Columbia mobilized their A-team. There was, I guess, the stars aligned, as my husband would often say, that the A-team was on call on the ICU floor. Dr. Greg Rosner, Dr. Brody, and some other real heroes were circuiting the ICU on November 9th. And they started to kind of mobilize and started to take care of my care. I just need to back up for a second, and I want to kind of just go back to being in Lawrence. Now, my blood pressure had dropped so low, which is obviously what takes you into cardiac arrest, that they had started to put me on something called vasopressors. And for the non-medical people out there, including myself till I learn this, vasopressors, what they do is vasopressors get your vitals to work for you. So your body intuitively knows what organs it needs to survive. So it sends the blood flow to your brain and your heart and, what your body considers its vital organs to live. Unfortunately, it doesn't consider your hands or your legs, your extremities as vital organs, so it doesn't send the blood flow out to them, and that's what causes gangrene to set in. Because if your extremities or other parts of your body, for that matter, don't have blood flow, they do die. So it's called pro performa. And that Sunday night already, they started to see that my fingertips were kind of turning purple and black. I mean, it hadn't, gone up as far yet, but they started to see that, the pro performa was starting to kick in because my blood pressure had gone so low, and the vasopressors, again, only vasopressors are intuitive to your body to know what organs need to survive, right? We can all survive. We can't survive without a heart or a brain, but we can't survive without hands and legs, right? So
it's like a triage machine, basically. They prioritize your heart, they prioritize your brain. But like you said, the legs, the arms,
those aren't considered vital organs to live,
right?
Despite what I think.
Right.
But so that's kind of where the pro performa started to start, Sunday night, or they started to see signs of it. So by the time I got to Columbia already, it was already starting to set in, on the fingertips and your toes, by Monday morning. So just jumping back ahead to arriving at Columbia, coming in the ambulance, the A team assembles, at Columbia for me. Dr. Greg Rosner was called in.
Can I ask you, at this point of the process, is this still you being told what happened, or are you remembering this part of it from what happened?
All of this is being told to me.
Okay.
I don't have any recollection of this.
Right.
Of being transferred to Columbia as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Since that Sunday morning, after that Sunday morning of me asking my sister to get me Gatorade.
Really?
Yeah, I have no recollection of any of this.
Wow.
I don't have recollection of my daughter talking to me after I coded. Nothing. I don't have recollection of moving Monday. None of this. I mean, my sister, my husband, and my brother, the rest of the family all can tell you this. This is not,
I do want to tell you that it's remarkable how vivid your recounting of this saga is. Yeah. Which is a testament to your relationship with the people that were close with you and around you.
Right.
That clearly have shared all of this with you.
Yes. And I've spent many thousands of hours having my husband repeat it to me over and over and over and over. On many long drives to the prosthetic place, but we'll save that for further down the line. So on Monday, they put me on something called the ECMO machine. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, or I guess it's one of these things until you hear it, or you have to experience or have interaction with it, you never know it. You hear it on Grey's Anatomy a lot. You hear it on all these shows. I'm sure I heard it many times over the years until 2015, but until 2015, until it affected me, I didn't, never really resonated in my head. So they put me on what they call the ECMO machine, and basically it works your heart for you. So at that point, I was put into an induced coma. And they put me on the ECMO machine, and it basically works your heart for you. So you're frozen. You're essentially frozen. It's this machine, this ECMO machine, which was designed for infants, from what I understand, is doing all the work for you. It's literally working your heart. And you have to remember, at this point, I was in complete organ failure also. My kidneys weren't working. Nothing was working.
That's all a result, I imagine, of 26 minutes of just being gone.
I don't know if it's, I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily from the cardiac arrest. I think it's from your body was shutting down. The bacterial infection, for however it ever got there. And that's going to be the question I'll have, or the first question I'll have when I get up there one day, is where this bacterial infection came from. It's, it's called strep pneumo. And that's what essentially it was. It's somehow a bacteria got into my bloodstream. And if you know anything, when a bacteria gets into your bloodstream, you're cooked unless they can catch it fast enough. And
it also sort of masked as the flu.
Correct. So that's exactly how it masked itself. Now, one might say because I got the flu first, and because my immune system was compromised, I got an infection, or was it the infection that masked itself behind the flu, or sepsis really masked itself behind the flu? So we'll never really know what it was.
You'll need another encounter with the 26,
right? To get to that.
Hopefully,
correct.
I'd may have
That's right. Not ready for round 2 just yet. With that being said, so I was in a coma for 9 days, and the ECMO machine was working my heart for those 9 days. And I believe, if I'm correct, I think that they took me off of it on the following Tuesday, November 17th. My husband's not here. He could validate everything. But I'm pretty sure it was the following Tuesday, November 17th. And it took me about a day or so to wake up. And at that point, that's where, when I woke up on November 17th or 18th, from that point on, I remember everything.
We'll be right back to this episode of the Meaningful People podcast. Guys, I want to tell you, and gals, guys and gals. By the way, guys is like all-inclusive, just saying. But I want to tell you that I was talking to someone in Yom Tov, and they told me that they had just made a wedding, and they spent upwards of $7,000 on wedding invitations. And my jaw dropped. I said, are you kidding me? Have you not heard of Yid Cards yet? YidCards.com is the way to send invitations, not just to weddings, but to anything. But for me, when I'm thinking about it, especially to weddings, cut your budget in half or a quarter. Head to yidcards.com. And it's not just about saving money. It's about upping the quality. They have so many amazing templates. You can send your invitation with music, the ability for your guest to RSVP, the ability for your guest to access your registry from the very invitation. This is 100 times better than getting an invitation in the mail, someone having to open it up, think, well, am I going to reply to this? Do I want the chicken, the meat? People don't do that anymore, right? They don't put chicken or meat on the invitation. They used to. But anyways, you can do all those types of things with yidcards.com for birthdays, for weddings, bar mitzvahs, bas mitzvahs, whatever it is that you're celebrating, corporate events. Use yidcards.com. You have a designer that made you an amazing template. You can upload that as well. That's yidcards.com. Go ahead and check it out. And that extra money that you saved, I don't know, give some tzedakah, I guess. And enjoy the rest of this episode. So waking up, I guess, what was that like for you? At that point, was there any difference in your physical appearance at that point yet? Or it was the same as it was when you had first gone to the hospital?
No. So at that point, they had me kind of wrapped like a mummy. Each of my legs were wrapped all the way up, and my hands were wrapped also. So I didn't see what was going on. I hadn't seen at that point. They were already gone, meaning they were black at that point, from the propofol and from the no blood flow after after so many days. So my hands were wrapped. I saw my fingertips, and I could see that they were already black. The first thing I remember when I woke up was asking my husband if I was going to be a paraplegic. And I think that was the very first thing I had asked him when I woke up. And he said to me, no, you're not going to be a paraplegic. But he didn't tell me yet. And I don't think they even knew yet the severe extent of the damage. We just knew that, there was obviously extensive damage. And through that whole week, they basically kept telling my husband that there was no chance of her survival. They kept telling him I was the sickest patient in Colombia, that there was nobody sicker than me in that entire hospital. And that's a pretty bad, damn big place up there on Washington Heights. So they had told him that the chances of her surviving. And I remember my husband telling me oftentimes, your mother was so worried about your hands and your legs. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And he kept trying to tell her, there's no point in even looking at that if she's not even going to be here.
Yeah.
Can't even think about that when she's not even going to be here. And they literally had given him no hope. I mean, they really just gave me a 1 or 2% chance of survival. So as many of them will still tell you today, I guess, or whatever you want to take it, it's considered a miracle by all accounts that I am here today. And I guess that's when life for me as I knew it and the whole shift, was going to change.
Can I press pause
Sure.
for a moment? So sitting here in the studio with you, for anyone that's listening, you're clearly experiencing real-time emotion where tears are literally falling from your eyes. And I want to invite you, if you can, to just, what's coming up for you?
I guess recounting it in such detail. I haven't done this in a very long time. This month, I think next week, March 26th. What are we, March 15th day? Next month,
16th.
March 26th marks 7 years. The day I came home from the hospital, it was the day after Purim that year. So I haven't kind of thought about the moments and the day-to-day of what happened then in a long time. I think about the bigger picture a lot and fleeting moments, but I haven't kind of recounted the story in a while.
And I want to take this opportunity to thank you for being open and for being so vulnerable and sharing your story with our listeners, because the type of experience that you're describing is truly unfathomable for me sitting here, I can tell you, just across from you. And I would imagine our listeners listening to it, this is not the type of story that anyone hears.
No, it's certainly not.
And this is
Certainly
the
not
life
from
that you're living.
not from the person, themselves either.
And I just want to thank you for being so brave and courageous to come in here and share this and to go through what you're experiencing right now.
I appreciate it. Thank you for recognizing that.
Of course.
So I guess that, those moments where you're waking up and you had mentioned that they told your husband there's a 1 to 2% chance, which I got luckily the doctors don't decide those things, right? Lucky for you, lucky for everybody. But there was a moment, I guess, that your vitals, your heart, your brain started, coming around and making a comeback, and you went home. That's what happened?
Not quite.
Okay, so
I wish it was that simple.
So tell me.
So that again was probably about the second week in November. I was in I'll just give you guys a little bit of the timeline. I was in the ICU for 6 weeks. They moved me up they moved me up to the 5th floor, which is the cardiac care. So this Dr. Greg Rosner, who I mentioned before, was on rotation in the ICU that week. He runs all of cardiology on the 5th floor at Columbia, the real superstar. He kind of took me under his wing. And what they call it from the ICU, when you move to a step down unit. And his cardiology unit was my step down unit. And I was in the ICU for 6 weeks. And I just want to talk about that for a minute. I want to tell, I'm just making me remember it here. There is no place probably on earth, or I'm sure there are, but being in the ICU is hell on earth. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I was intubated and I couldn't speak, and it was very frustrating because I started to wake, I started to become conscious and I was with it. And I knew what was going on, but you can't communicate. And it's so frustrating not to be able to. You're intubated and, you've got, tubes down your throat. And they had the, Jill knows probably better than me, but they had the, this tube connected to the trach. Thank you. See, there you go. I knew she would know better. Medical side of her comes out. The trach was just, just it was unbearable. It was just so hard. I want to talk about for a second. This is an interesting story. One of those, it was during those first 2 or 3 days that I woke up. I think it was the first day and a half when I was very alert. And I started to, I'm pretty sure it was Pitzal. I started to tell, and I started to say to him, I think even Rafi, my brother-in-law, was there. And I started talking about the trades that I had done a couple days before in my office. And I was saying, well, we have to, the trades have to settle. And I was talking about the exact trades that we had done, just right, prior, I guess, from my last moment at work. And I was talking about the trade IDs and the counterparties that I did them with. And I was like, we had to, I was saying we have to make sure that they, they clear and, just making sure that the risk was on. And I was, that and the hedge trades were there. And I was saying all of this. And I think I think Batsal and Rafi were so they were blown away that they thought I was losing my mind, that they went and called one of the guys who's a firm guy. His name is Scott Wittenberg. He worked at my company that I was at, and they called him and they asked him to come down because they thought I was crazy. They thought I had completely lost my mind, and he came and he heard me, and he was like, to this day, it's probably one of the most profound moments of his life that he says he will never, ever, ever forget, because he validated everything for them and knew exactly what I was talking about. And the fact that somebody could be on ice for more than 10 days and literally spew out the trades, the counterparties, the trade IDs. It was just,
your head was right back on the street.
Exactly.
I could tell you what you were dreaming about if you.
Exactly. So that was like, a very profound moment. Standing there one night in the ICU, I guess, with all of them. And I guess, at that point seeing, wow, her brain is completely still intact and that girl doesn't miss a beat kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of those moments where I think they were like, okay, she's still got her head. This is the Malki we all know. This is the Malki we all know. But going back, like I said, I was in the ICU till middle of December. And then I moved to the step down unit on the 5th floor. And I think it was mid-December, I remember, moving up there, probably first week in December, second week. December. And, all of this was trying to get me back. My kidneys hadn't come back yet. So that was also a big deal. And from this, I learned, and any medical person learns this in medical school, your kidneys are the last organ to come back. So I was doing dialysis at the same time, which also I never wish on my worst enemy. It was god awful. Certain things you could tolerate, certain things are just leave such a vivid imprint in your mind, such as the trach and being intubated and the dialysis. You have a complete and unfound respect for people who suffer and have to deal with this and need kidney transplants, that this is what they deal with every day. It was just really, really, really terrible. And just, it was miserable. And I was very lucky that I think by the 6th week, my kidneys had started to come back on their own. So the thought of having to have a kidney transplant on top of everything else we were dealing with, at least we were able to put that, to bed and aside. So we were grateful for that. And, all of this was trying to get me back to health, to a healthy form. We hadn't even yet been able to think about, don't forget, my hands and legs were still completely wrapped, and there was still that issue to think about. What were we going to do? We had to deal with all that. You had dead extremities on you. What does one do at that point? But, the first was to get me back alive and strong enough and know that I was going to survive at least. And at that point, I was on the 5th floor and people were coming to visit me. I remember even Jill came and she was going to visit her son in Israel. I remember She was in school that year in yeshiva, and she said she was sitting by my bed and she was telling me how she was going to Israel to visit her son Jesse, and that she was going to come back after she went to Israel for a few days. And people were coming nonstop, and I was never left alone.
Another testament to the community that you're from.
Beyond. My sister-in-laws no one left me alone. From the minute I walked in that November night until I think I spent the first night, probably maybe mid-January, February, was the first night I stayed by myself. Both my sister-in-laws would sleep there in the hospital every night. They had a rotation, whether it was my sister, my sister-in-laws, my friend Sarah. People were round the clock sleeping in the hospital and staying by my side. And that was, again, Jill can tell you, the community made sure that I never ate a piece of hospital food in 6 months.
Well, thank God for that.
That is a record in itself. If you ask anybody
oh man,
who can get through 6 months in the hospital and not eat an iota of hospital food.
I think they said that's a medical miracle as well.
That is probably a medical miracle. And that there was constant care, and that I was never left alone at any moment. And my family too. I have 3 children. At that time, my youngest was 6.5. My other one had just turned, my son had just turned 12 a week before this all happened. And my daughter was almost turning 15. So I had 3 kids here who had no mother, watching strangers coming in and out of my house constantly. There was never a meal lacked, a haircut missed, You're
part of the greatest nation in the world,
Yeah, part of the greatest nation in the world is right. Is
unbelievable.
Is right.
I think it's also important to highlight for our listeners that a lot of times when someone in our life, a loved one, needs this type of love, where they need to be visited in a hospital or things at home tended to, a lot of times we find ourselves in just the routine of Mika Amcha Yisrael.
Correct.
And there's like this just chesed default that we just like plug into. And sometimes we lose sight of how meaningful and how impactful it actually is what we're doing. And as you're sitting here and sharing this, people that were by your side, at your bedside, the impact that they've had on you until today, that you still feel that and you still know that, and it's so important and valuable to you. I think it's important to highlight for everyone, we are the greatest nation in the world, and Mika Amcha Yisrael, but every time we do that chesed, we're really, really doing something amazing.
Not only are we doing it for ourselves, Mika Amcha Yisrael, but the message that it sent to the non-Mika Amcha Yisrael, meaning the non-Jews, and I just want to step on that for a second, Momo, because you brought it up, is that obviously I worked for a company, and I have many non-Jewish counterparts. What they saw from what our people stepped in to do was nothing short of an absolute Kiddush Hashem, that the non-Jews could see how we are. And there is nobody in this world like our people who step up and rise to the occasion. And for us to make such a Kiddush Hashem to all my coworkers, not just in my office, but all the way across to the London exchanges and across the world, that people saw this was really, really a Kiddush Hashem beyond words could ever say. I mean, it still comes up in conversations today. My husband made sure around the clock that even I wasn't left alone Shabbos, and he called in my coworkers who were obviously not Jewish and said, "Can you take the Saturday shift?" And they said, they all said to him, "What can we do, Jonathan?" And he said, "You know what? Can you take the Saturday shift? Because Saturday is obviously a day that we can't get here." And they all saw the testament, and it just what it showed them is how strong of a people we are, and we stop at nothing to help our own. And this is what we are taught from the moment we are born. This is what goes back to the days of Avraham and Gemilas Chasadim. I mean, this is what we are, the moment we step into this world, this is what's ingrained in our heads.
It's amazing.
It really is.
I was giving you credit for your work at the firm, right? And pardon me for calling you a trailblazer. But I was giving you credit for your work that you were doing at the firm and the work that you did from the hospital of being a Or Lagayim, of being a light onto the nations, was even more impactful.
I would agree with that.
More than any trade.
Yeah, more than any trade. 10 times over, 1,000 times over.
Best investment.
Best investment. Best investment.
I'm out of puns.
Yeah.
You got any? Does any part of you feel that, you know, that sense of community around you when you're going through this is maybe part of why you're sitting here today?
Oh, I 100% believe it. I 100% believe it.
Meaning, had the situation been where people weren't visiting, God forbid, maybe it'd be a lot more difficult.
I often think of how scary this would have been to go through this during COVID and be sealed off from the rest of the world. I never would have made it through. Never. Wow. It's very isolating sitting in that hospital.
I mean, for every listener, and we have a very important mitzvah, right, to visit the sick.
That's right.
And you're hearing from somebody who was there in the ICU for months. Those are really powerful, impactful words to say that you don't know if you would have made it without these people.
Oh, I know I would not have. It's a guarantee. A guarantee.
That's incredible.
That's why the human emotion is extremely powerful, and no one should ever underestimate it. No one should ever
I think there's about to
underestimate
be a big upsurge in hospital visits by our great nation over here.
And if time was endless here, I could sit here and tell you the stories of the tzaddikim and the people I met that came through out of their gemilas chasadim that they come and spend Shabbos walking around the hospital visiting people. I mean, it's to think that this human element exists out there. Again, if we could sit here for days, the stories I could tell you.
Angels.
It's beyond malachim. Beyond.
Amazing.
There must be a level above that between malachim and Hashem. There must be a level between it.
Well,
is there one story that sticks out for you?
There is, but I think it deserves its own entity in itself because of the woman who was behind it. And maybe one day we'll share that.
It's going to have to be a movie, it sounds like.
So I'll keep it, but just leave it at extraordinary kindness.
Amazing.
What people take from their own suffering and turn into kindness is just really something.
Hey, we'll be right back to this episode in just a second, but you know what time it is. It is ILS title time. Infinity Land Services, they are the title company that you need in your corner. You know what? It's getting nice outside. It's summertime and houses are coming on the market, and you may be looking for a house, but you can't be closing on a home without the proper title company in your corner. So you're in the closing stages. You found that beautiful home. You're very excited to move. Who is doing title for you? And you know what? You might be thinking, well, I don't really care, honestly. Whoever does title for me. But you should. It's important. And if you don't care, then just take my word for it. Make sure you reach out to ILS. That's Infinity Land Services. They know what they're doing. They will have your back regardless of what's going on. They have no horror stories. They get it done. And you know what? There are horror stories that exist out there, especially when it comes to title. It's not always so smooth unless you go with ILS Title. So that's Infinity Land Services. Head to ilstitle.com. You know who you want in your corner, and that is ILS. They are in my corner. They are here with me. Actually, I'm recording this. They're staring at me in the corner. Am I doing a good job, guys? Yes. I'm kidding. They're not. They're doing someone's closing right now because that's what they do best. So make sure to head to ilstitle.com and make sure that there's no horror stories in your story. Enjoy the rest of this episode. Okay, I want to take you, I guess, to the moment where they thank God that, you know, your life was back and your heart is getting better, your brain is getting better, but they say, you know what, we got to deal with the limbs here. Do you remember that moment and what was that?
I do very clearly. It was January, and we were actually all in the room at that point. My husband was there, my brother-in-law Bensi was there, Rafi was there, my mother was there. I think that's all of us were there. Dr. Rosenwasser, who was the orthopedic surgeon, came in. He had a whole entourage with him. So you have to also imagine, you know, here I'm this.
How was a big room?
Yeah. I'm this person probably who weighs like at that point 70 pounds, this little girl in a what felt like a little girl in a bed, surrounded by a whole entourage of people, and he looks at them and he says they're gone and there's nothing we can do. And I remember turning to Tali. He was on my left side, and I started to cry, and I started to tell him, no, Tali, it can't be true. It can't be true. Do something, Tali, do something. And I remember him putting his hands up on his face, and he was, I think, in such disbelief also. I mean, he was so strong through all of this, and he had his pulse on every single beat. But I think hearing it when they were all standing there with this massive team telling him this and seeing me cry, that I couldn't believe it was true. And I remember looking at my mother, and and it was like time to face the music. Like, what were we going to do at that point? This was it. Like, the moment of the judgment day had arrived, and there was a lot that was going on to get us to that point. There was a day, that I had spent like about, I can't even remember. It was probably about 5-6 hours in an MRI machine. And if anybody knows what those MRI machines are, they're those claustrophobic machines. And I remember my brother-in-law, Bensi, stayed with me that day. My husband had to finish up some of the work that he was still working on, and he stayed with me. And I was saying, Bensi, I don't want to do this. I hate this. And he said, this is the moment we've been waiting for, Malki. You have to get through it. You have to just do it. This is the moment we've been trying to get to see if your limbs can survive. So there had been a lot of, I guess, a lot of tests and agony and hours of sonograms that they used to take me for to see if there was any vitality in the extremities. And that day in January, after all those MRIs and the sonograms and the this and the that had been taken, and that was that moment of all of us standing in the room, and he said, that's it. There's just no hope for them. And everybody was giving us advice, and somebody said, go see this Dr. Chu, who's on the east side, who's in Lango, in NYU, and he's dealt with this before, and go see this doctor in Philadelphia. And we started running everywhere. We went to see Dr. Chu on the east side on Park Avenue somewhere, and, getting me in and out. You have to imagine carrying this whole body that doesn't even move. You can't get it. It was just monumental. And that was how a lot of January was spent trying to figure out second opinions and third opinions, and calling all the Gedolei Hador in the orthopedic surgery world. You had Boston on the phone, and you had Philadelphia on the phone, and you had New York. I mean, everywhere and anywhere, they scoured the earth to try and see if there was a second opinion. Started talking about me going to the Mayo Clinic, and they thought they may be able to do something, and see if maybe going to the Mayo Clinic and picking me up and moving there was an option. And I think that was a very vital point. That was probably like the end of December, beginning of January, where I think at that point I started to take control. And I was like, I think that was the very first decision that Malki had the power to make. And I said, I am not going to the Mayo Clinic. And you talk about being isolated. The thought of going to live in Minnesota by myself, or just my husband without my kids and my friends, and being so lonely, it wasn't even, I wouldn't even hear of it. It was just, I wouldn't even hear of it, because that's the only shred that I had to keep me alive at that point was my friends and my kids and my husband. And to be left in the middle of Minnesota, it just wasn't worth it at that point. It just wasn't worth it. And I remember that was it. And I remember Dr. Rosner, who, remember him, he's the ultimate, warrior in all of this. And he said, you made the right decision. And when he said it to me, I knew that I had finally, this was my first decision to make. This was Malki back in action. And if my kids were here, especially my daughter, she would tell you, Mommy is the most controlling. Mommy always gets her way, no matter what. So this was the Malki back, saying that this was where we stop. And, this was time to face the music and start dealing with what was going to be. And that's when it all kind of started. From there, I think it was probably end of January, beginning of February, they moved me to the cardiac care unit because that's where we started. That's how the surgeries kind of got started. And first, what happened was at first they started to do my legs, so they amputated my legs to both knees, we started with we started with my legs. They amputated to both your knees. And any amputee will tell you, below the knee amputee, as we call it in the amputee world, it's kind of like a paper cut. If you have a below the knee amputation, it's like a paper cut. Your life really doesn't change a whole hell of a lot. Yeah, you're wearing a prosthetic leg, but truthfully, it's not the worst thing you could go through. Having kidney failure on dialysis is much worse. There's a COPD. I could think of a million things worse than having a below the knee amputee. And unfortunately, I think about, I don't remember if it was a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks in, they started to see that the knee on my left leg didn't survive. And we were going to have to go back and go above the knee. And the difference between a below the knee and above the knee is as different as night and day. It's just an absolute game changer. So I had to go back in for repetitive surgeries to, amputate above the knee also. And, the idea when a doctor's amputating is they want to take as least as possible. Every last inch is just so key and vital, to your ability to do every single thing. That every millimeter you save just propels you that much more forward. So we had to go back in and we had to do that because we couldn't save my knee. It had rotted and it wasn't able to survive. At the same time, between the legs, then we started with the arms, and they had to take my hands. And at one point, after we had the first couple surgeries on the hands, they even took my left arm and they sewed it to, believe it or not, they sewed it to my side. And these guys could see the way I'm sitting right now. And it was literally sewed to my side, to your torso, I guess, for probably, it was about 5 or 6 weeks. And they say that the skin kind of grows over, and that's what they were hoping for. So while I'm sitting here for 6 weeks with my left arm attached to my torso part of the body, I was still going in for repeat surgeries. And I think it was middle of February at that point that we had to figure out how. So here I lost my knee on my left leg and it was rotted. So how were they going to close it up? What were they going to do to, how were we going to even save this, whatever was left of her leg at that point, to get it, to get it to function? And it was a Friday night, and I had a 12-hour surgery that night. And what they did was they took the lat muscle from what exists in your back. So if anybody knows, your lat muscle exists kind of right behind your back over there. And they took my lat muscle from my back and they made it into a flap on my knee on my left leg, or where the knee was. That's what they covered that with. So that, and I'm looking at Momo's face and he looks like he's about to hit the floor. So to show you the power of how God creates us, he gives us spare parts, that we can live without, and how genius these doctors were to be able to take a lat muscle that sits probably right below your clavicle in your back and be able to use that to act as a flap for my leg where my knee once existed.
The face that you're seeing on me is the face of absolute respect for someone who has lived through this decision-making process and the need to prioritize every millimeter and every, as you call it, spare part of our body. And what's occurring to me is that there are people, maybe some of which are listening to this podcast, that live their life day by day and experience frustration when they lose Wi-Fi connection.
I could say I'm probably one of those up until November 2nd. Get pissed off at the stupidest things, right? Don't we all?
Yeah.
We're human too, right? God created us that way also.
And I think you're uniquely positioned to just bring some perspective to the life that we're granted and gifted by Hashem, and to just appreciate everything that we do have.
True. And it teaches us all the koach and gevura that we say in a bracha every morning, that this is the time to act, right? And that God knew when he designed us as human beings, he designed us with every specific part in mind to act as a purpose, right? Whether we know it, Hashem did it.
And I think what is also so striking about meeting you, and I know you knew my sisters from when I was a kid, but I'm meeting you now for the first time, in at least since I'm forming memories. And you share every part of the story with such a smile and such a humor, even with the emotion that you're experiencing right now. And it's remarkable to me. And I'm wondering, where do you draw that strength from?
I think time. I don't think I could have said this 3 years ago or 5 years ago. I think time kind of gives you that. I think time kind of gives you that ability to see the irony in it, maybe.
I think more than anything, I'm seeing a lot of resilience, because you have every excuse in the world to probably just stay inside, lay down, call it a day. You've been through the worst, and you haven't done that. You still travel.
Yep.
You still go to parties. You make parties.
Joel Bess, how are you though?
That's right, Joel.
Big partier, they say. You just made a simcha for one of your kids.
Yes.
You just made a vart for your kid. And
my shout out to Joel was not about partying. My shout out to Joel was about being at the parties that you make.
Yeah.
Mine just made a simcha, right?
Mine was about partying. Joel, Joel, take it down a notch. But I guess, at what point did you make that decision? And I guess maybe you'll say, hey, listen, what choice did I have? But I think there is a choice. I think there are many people that probably do just hang it up and say, I'm just not. And no one could say anything to them. Yeah. What was that decision to say, I'm still going to live?
So I think let me try it this way. I think talk is cheap to a certain extent, meaning we all say that, right? We all say we could all choose to stay in bed and we could all choose not to get up, but can we really?
Let's knock that. Let's take that metaphor.
We really?
Let's bury it right now. Can we?
Come on.
You tell me.
I don't believe that. And I'll tell you this much. I am not the only woman who's gone through this. I am not the only religious woman who's gone through this. And all the women I've known who've gone through this all do the same thing I do. They all have families, children. They get up, they go to their kids' sitter's place, they go grocery shopping, they cook for Shabbos. I am not one on my own here. And all the women I've met who've gone through this the same way. I can tell you the women who went through this after me, which was pretty crazy in itself, that Columbia hadn't seen a story like mine in decades. All of a sudden it had two women, same storyline, same age, same demographic, same everything in a matter of 3 months. And she too she's actually an absolute superpower phenomenon in my book. So, and she had to have a kidney transplant on top of all of it. I mean,
well, you seem to know a lot about her. You got to know her?
Yes. We were very instrumental in helping her because we were a little bit, like I said, this happened to me in November. And then this case, exact same type of case happened in June of 2016. So
I think that's extraordinary because you know what? You could be right. And I'm not going to argue with you. What choice do I have? I'm going to get up. I'm going to go to the grocery. I'm going to be there for my kids. But to take what you went through and to help someone else going through it, that's not a given.
Really?
It's not. I don't think so.
I don't know.
people go through tragedies and they curl up. They curl up. I'm gonna go and start speaking to people who've been through them. Yeah, that's what you're doing. You're helping people. You're helping people. God dealt you with what's seemingly down here is a blow, and you're saying, well, watch this. That's what it looks like for me. How about you?
You're humble, Malki.
Different strokes for different folks. You know.
You're so controlling, Malki.
Sarita, you hear that?
You had shared something else when you were remembering some of the angels in the hospital. You mentioned the accolade of turning darkness into light, and where that's the brightest light can only shine out of the darkness. And I give my colleague here, Nachi, credit.
I'm a colleague now.
For giving you credit for taking something in your life's experience that can be darkness, and you've shown a tremendous light through it by helping others, by being brave enough to share your story vulnerably and to inspire a lot of people, that Hashem puts us in scenarios for a purpose, and you are actively living through that purpose.
So don't we all have a mission here?
We're getting to you. We're getting to you a little bit, no?
Don't we all have a purpose? Some of us are maybe more defined. Some of us find out earlier than later. But I think we all have a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it maybe comes clearer than others, but I think we all have a purpose here.
What do you feel your purpose is now?
Get on my kids' nerves.
That's a given.
Right. I'm not sure what my purpose is here. I still don't know. I wish I did. It would give me a lot of clarity if I did.
Was there? I'm not gonna say was there. I'm sure there were days, and please don't bite me. But I'm sure there were days that after this happened, you said, "Is this what I'm living for?"
There were a lot of days. I can't say I'm the same person that I was in 2016, and I will say for the first year and a half, I was very, very, very depressed, and I did not want to live. I did not want to live at all. It was like facing that this is what your future is going to be. And I came from being this complete independent person, not needing anybody in terms of, whether, I just pride myself on being so independent, and not to going to being somebody who is completely and utterly dependent on every single move that they make, every move we make all day. I was completely dependent, and I still am to a large degree. Every single minute of the day, think about it. Every time you open your hands, you put your hand on a doorknob, you go to the bathroom, you wash your hands. Every move you make, requires requires working, requires, a level of your own will to do something. Your own brain sends the message to open a doorknob. Your own brain puts your hand on a refrigerator door to get yourself something to eat. And all of that, the most basic of basic, being able to brush your teeth, is taken away from you. You say, what's the point? What am I here for? What am I here for? And my husband used to try for months and months and months, but your brain still works. I said, how can I even make a Shabbos meal? I can't do anything. I'm useless. I can't do anything. And he used to tell me, but your brain can. Your brain is here. Your brain is here. You can still help the kids right there do their homework. You can still use your brain, Malki. You can still do everything you did. You just need to do it in a different type of fashion. So we'll get you somebody to stand here in the kitchen and help you make Shabbos. You'll tell them what to do. You don't need to wash dishes, he used to tell me.
And I might dare say that I agree with your husband 100%. Everything that you're able to do with your brain is absolutely your capability. But for me, your superpower is something that anyone that can open a refrigerator door can't do, which is your ability to sit here and inspire every single person to look at any challenge that they have and say, I can endure that. I can thrive through that. That's something that you were not capable of doing beforehand. and you're uniquely capable of doing today.
But you have to believe it for more than the 5 minutes you listen to this podcast. And that's why up until today, I've never agreed to do anything, because I feel that, and so many of the people who go to my prosthetic place are all, superheroes in their own way. You have an amputee who climbs Mount Everest, who's a motivational speaker, and you got somebody else who's a motivational speaker for, skiing in the Olympics. And I'm a big believer in that and people have said to me, why not, Malki? Why not? And I don't believe that. I think that we come to these things, whether we're sitting in a massive theater, an amphitheater with a guy standing at the podium telling a story with 1,000 people, or listening to a podcast or watching it on TV, that it can't just be for the 5 minutes. You walk away and you say, wow, that was so inspiring. And 5 minutes later, you walk out your house and in your car and you forget. The point has to be that you have to really keep it with you and you have to really remember it. It can't just be the one hit 5 minute wonder.
So take it to that next level. How do people do that? I'm looking to you for direction. How do people?
I myself have to work on that.
5 minutes.
I'm human too. I get super frustrated with things, and I get caught up in the shtus too. Right? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I love your honesty.
I mean, I'd be lying to you, and
Most
my family would be
award.
laughing at you if they didn't tell you, Mommy gets crazy about the stupidest things. My kids think I'm crazy because I make them clean off the table a certain way. Why can't Mommy just let it go? I get caught up in the mundane things too, like everybody else. We're all wired the same. And they're like, why can't you just let it go? Because I can. I'm OCD. What do you want from me? Counter has to be clean this way. The blanket has to be folded this way.
Right?
Yes.
Just
See?
clean the counter, but
Right. No,
God.
just make the bed that way. Pull the covers. We're all
Who raised
wired
you?
the same way. We're all wired the same way. So when you find out that answer, you send it to me also.
Fair enough.
Wow. Honest. Wow. I have no words. For the first time ever,
Really?
in
Come on. I don't believe
120 something podcasts I've done, I'm speechless. What am I supposed to say? What, like, your honesty, your like rawness. Momo, take it away.
Yeah, no, your candor is very refreshing. And you're right. That is the avodah. The avodah is to fill our life with inspiration, but the work is to implement it.
Right.
And that's a life's work.
That's a life's work, right?
That is a life's work, to take any story, any feeling of inspiration. It's fleeting.
Right.
It's fleeting by its very nature.
Don't get caught up in the silliness. Don't be so angry at the world and life. Realize what you have versus what you don't have. And I think that's probably the biggest message. Realize what you have, not what you don't have. And I think the world we live in today, everything is so supercharged, and this need for instant gratification and instant results and need to have right away. We all get caught up in a certain way. We have to live a certain life. We have to be a certain way. We have to have certain things. It's you got to realize what we have, not what we don't have.
Well, I want to thank you, Malki, for coming in this evening. You've inspired me, and my goal coming away from this conversation,
And your colleague.
Thank you. Is tomorrow, when it's later than 5 minutes, and I encounter some kind of roadblock and some kind of mania and some kind of lachatz and some kind of moment, to remember these 5 minutes.
That's right.
Malkie Jacobs. Anything you want to specifically leave our audience with, the people who are listening an hour and 13 minutes in? What do you want to leave them with?
To keep being a better Ka'amcha Yisrael, to be there, to continue to be there for one another, to, again, take that same applicable on the material side of look at not just look at what you have materially versus not what you don't have, but do it the same on an emotional level. Do it for the person who's suffering on the other side and needs a little bit more chizuk. Do it for the person who needs a little bit more emotional spirit. Do it for the person who needs a little bit of more of a connection to another human being. think about the judgment that people use. Think more that somebody's trying to better you and look out for you rather than think that somebody's trying to gossip about you. Think that give a person the benefit of the doubt that we all want to strive to be better and we all want to strive to look in a more positive direction. And I just think that's what we have to continuously focus on. And I think, obviously we all hope that's what's going to bring Mashiach too, right? But I think that's the unified answer.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Malki. Really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Meaningful People podcast. Malki had an amazing story, and we love featuring stories like this. Hey, you have somebody in mind that you think, you know what, they should be featured on Meaningful People? Go ahead, send us an email at meaningfulpeoplepodcast@gmail.com. We look at those emails, we read those emails, and we reach out to the guests that you send us to have on, like Malkie Jacobs. She came from one of those emails. So we were so excited to have her on, and we hope that this episode moved you. There was definitely strong chizuk and call to action about how amazing Klal Yisrael is and what the things that kept her going are. So really hope you took that to heart. We have more episodes coming your way, so make sure to subscribe. I know like 70-something% of you are not subscribed yet to our YouTube channel and to our Spotify and Apple, or specifically Apple. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It really does help us. It helps more people find our podcast. So it costs nothing. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment. We love hearing from you. And of course, there's more content from the Meaningful Minute team. Go ahead and search Pause, our new mental health mindfulness podcast, available on all places you can get your podcast. Search it on Spotify. Search on Apple, featuring Dr. Benji Epstein. We are there for you. Your mental health is important. We have a new WhatsApp line that is catered to mental health. The link to join it is in the description of this episode. I am Nachi Gordon. Momo Bauman is right here with me in spirit. Couldn't make it today, but we will see you again next week on another episode of the Meaningful People podcast. Love you guys. Hope you enjoyed this video from Meaningful Minute. We have so much more content for you. You may like this. You may like this. Take your pick. Let us know what you think.